Good afternoon, students. In the last lecture we had a look at the basic concepts, physics concepts in the reactors, how the fission reaction happens, what is the probability of a fission reaction, and what are the fissile elements, what do you mean with the chain reaction, and all these aspects which are related to the fission, production of heat in a nuclear reactor. Now, we will see what a nuclear reactor is composed of. Now, with this background of these basic principles, the major application as we saw is in the nuclear reactors, that is for power production, but also in other fields, and in this lecture we are only going to touch upon the nuclear reactors, about which is the main topic. Now, you must have heard about the scientist Enrico Fermi. He and his colleagues were able to create a reactor setup wherein the fission reaction was sustained, that is they could arrive at a geometry of fissile elements and moderation etc. to come to a reactor, and that is called as the Chicago pile, and this reactor became critical on December 2nd, 1942. Of course, this is the first time man created a fission chain reaction, but of course it was not this. There was a backup of lot of research done by Enrico Fermi and many other people in this. So, this is just gives you a picture of the Chicago pile, and it contains, you see, graphite, 400 tons of graphite. Graphite is the moderator here, and inside we have 6 tons of uranium metal and also uranium oxide, 37 tons of uranium oxide, and since they are piled up one over the other, this was also called as the pile. So, the Chicago pile or the atomic pile as we call it. Now, as I mentioned, moderation is required to have a good fission reaction, good probability of a fission reaction. So, the geometry thus created, then you must also have the control, and here you have got 2 operators. See, one operator is sitting and he is monitoring the display. Basically, he is looking at the neutron counts, whether they are going up or coming down, and here you see one operator keeping his hand on a lever arm. This person is actually raising or lowering the control rods. So, what you do, initially the control rods are down. So, any neutron is there, it gets absorbed, that is, it cannot produce a chain reaction. Slowly the control rods are raised by this operator. When it goes up, at a certain point of time the absorption is not that much. So, the fission reactions start. Now, if he raises it more, the fission reactions, number of fission reactions may increase, but that is where he controls. This is a manual control, and basically the rods here were made of cadmium. So, cadmium control rods were doing the control. Now, cadmium, boron, they are all very efficient neutron capturing materials. So, what happens when the rod is pushed inside, it absorbs more neutrons, when it is taken out it absorbs less neutrons and then tries to maintain the neutron balance. Now, this control system and monitoring, there was nothing in those days, nothing automatic or any what you call devices or computers available in those days. So the man, the monitoring man and the control man, they will be talking only through voice. So that way they were talking, that is how in this Fermi pile it was controlled. But what I want to emphasize here, that awareness of safety, that is, if the two fellows who are talking, if there is a bit of a mismatch, the reactor can go supercritical, was kept in mind even at that time. So Fermi and his colleagues had thought of an emergency mechanism to take care as the next level. Here this emergency mechanism is actually, there is a set of control rods at the top, which of course this is not very visible in this figure, somewhere here it is very what you call feeble. So what they have, a fellow is standing with an axe, and Fermi, if suppose he says scram, he will cut the rope and the with the axe, and the control rods will fall into the core and shut down the reactor. So one set of rods for control and one set of rods for safety, and this scram word itself has emanated from this, it is an acronym for safety control rod axe man. Of course as the later things went, nobody talks of an axe in a nuclear reactor now. So it is still, the word scram is used, but it is called as safety control rod accelerated movement. This is the explanation or expansion for scram these days. Not only this, remember he had another level of defense. They had a tank containing cadmium salt solution ready to be poured into the pile and shut down the reaction. So what I want to emphasize here again, safety, backup safety, two lines of safety backup was there. So that safety as a culture with the first reactor pile itself is an example. Now the people are working there around, so they have a detector which measures the radiation level, and this was used so that the operators, whether they are in which field, radiation field, they should not go to a particular level. Even this was observed right from that time. Then what is the other component of the, now let us look at the total components of the any reactor. We have the fuel which is made in the form of pellets. Just to give you an idea, it is about ½ inch diameter, and a number of pellets are put inside a can which is called as the clad, and they are stacked up inside, and this we refer to as fuel pin. So this is a fuel pellet, a number of fuel pins becomes a fuel pellets become a fuel pin or called as a fuel rod. Then number of such pins are arranged in a rectangular or a hexagonal configuration, and they are called as fuel assembly. This rectangular configuration is used in the some type of water reactors, the hexagonal is used in the fast reactors, we will see later. And the fuel is normally uranium oxide. In the initial days they did use uranium metal, but as I mentioned earlier, the melting point of uranium was low, they can go to high temperatures, higher the temperature, higher the steam production was possible, higher temperature, higher efficiency. So they went to uranium oxide, and the clad for all the water reactors was mostly zirconium, because zirconium is not a very good absorber of neutrons, and the coolant flows inside the fuel assembly and removes the heat produced in the fuel. Now many assemblies like this are stacked up and you have the reactor core. Now not shown here are some positions which will have the control rods. There will be a number of control rods, so that we have the control on all portions of the reactor. Now within the reactor core, the fuel enrichment may not be same. At the center it may be lower, afterwards it is higher, because the neutron flux is maximum here, neutron flux is less on the outside. So to have nearly equal power generation, we have enrichment difference. Now the peripheral assemblies around the core, they are reflecting materials. Normally we use stainless steel that reflects the neutrons which are coming out or leaking out of the core back to the reactor core. So if the leakage is reduced, all the neutrons, more neutrons are available for the chain reaction, and this whole setup itself is put in a large vessel, steel vessel, called as the reactor vessel, and of course it is also a pressure vessel because it has to withstand the pressure of the fluid. So this is a brief idea about what a reactor fuel, a fuel pin, a fuel assembly or a core or vessel will contain. Next is the coolant. Now the coolant is essential to remove the heat which is produced due to the nuclear fission, and not only that, we have to remove the heat, we must also remember that we have to honor the limits on the temperatures, maximum temperatures of the fuel and also the clad material. The coolant may be, if does not remove the heat within the temperature, the clad can fail. For example, if you take zirconium, the limit is somewhere around 350 to 400 degrees centigrade in a water reactor, because zirconium has a very strong reaction with water beyond the temperature. So we would not like to cross the temperature. Similarly on the fuel side, the melting point should not cross, should be crossed. So this coolant does this job. In other words, coolant maintains the temperature of the fuel and structure the clad within limits, and this water, if used as a coolant, it gets converted into steam, and this steam is taken to run a turbine which rotates a generator and produce electricity. This is one way, directly producing steam from the reactor and going to the turbine. Of course this is concept is called, used in the boiling water reactors, as we shall see later. Alternately, this water which is picking up the heat from the reactor core is sent to a heat exchanger, where it exchanges heat with another water which is converted into steam, and that runs a turbine generator. That is, you have two cycles, the first primary heat transport and then the secondary water also. This sort of concept is what is called as the pressurized water reactor, and that pressurized water reactor is the maximum number in the whole world. If you look at coolants, any other coolant we can think of, heavy water is a coolant, but heavy water directly we do not convert it into steam and use it, because heavy water is a very costly material. So, heavy water we use in the heavy water reactors, we shall see description later. Then we could use gas as a coolant, like carbon dioxide or helium could be used as a coolant. In fast reactors we use sodium, or we are now even thinking of using lead or bismuth, lead bismuth alloy. So, these are all the coolants. So, a reactor contains the fuel, the core, the coolant. As I mentioned, control rods most important from safety point of view and control, and we have mostly used cadmium and boron. Of course, there are other materials like indium, silver also, silver is a very costly material, and we have a number of rods, not one, so that we have a uniform sort of power production everywhere and uniform temperature, as uniform as possible. Now, when these rods are down, that means the reactor is shut down, and to raise the thing the rods are raised, and when it is on power you see the color becoming red. This shows that the reactor is producing heat. Now, if I want to control the power, I will reduce the height, bring it inside and maintain it at level, the neutron population will come down and then stabilize at another level, then that way my power would have been brought down. If I want to increase the power, I slightly rise one by one, not all rods are raised, only one by one at a time. Moderator we saw is an important, and the moderator should be efficient so that we can have a large number of slow neutrons, and large number of slow neutrons means more number of fissions. Light water is one of the moderators, graphite. I also mentioned about heavy water, the advantage being it has less of absorption than light water, but of course there is a price you have to pay, it is costly. Now, we have seen the reactor vessel is there. There is always again a factor which is motivated by the safety aspect. Should something happen and the reactor vessel fails, the component, the radioactive fuel can come out in case of an accident. So, all reactors are actually contained in a solid building, concrete structure, that again gives isolation from the environment, so that the environment does not get the radiation in case of an accident. Normally it is made of concrete, concrete is also a good neutron absorber and is a very good shield. In some of the reactors we have basically the Indian pressurized heavy water reactors, we have one containment building, there is a gap in another containment, two containments also, and these containments, believe it, they are also designed so that any external attack by an aircraft should not, that containment building should not fail, because this is very much important. We think about it nowadays only because terrorists can bring an aircraft and then crash it on your reactor to spoil your program. So, here also that has been considered. Now, the steam is produced in a heat exchanger. Normally heat exchangers which produce steam are called as a steam generator. It generates steam, so it is a steam generator, and it is a high pressure steam. So, this high pressure steam is sent to a turbine and generator, and rest of the system, a feed water system, then it has a condenser boiler just like in any other fossil fire plant. We will just have a look which are the components. See here, this is the steam generator. The steam which is produced goes here it is a high pressure turbine, it does work in the turbine, but as it does work in the turbine, the quality of the steam comes down and at some stage it becomes wet. Now you see the turbines use very fine thin blades. So there is a limit on the amount of wetness that they can withstand, because any water particles will cause erosion of the blades. So normally it is about 10 to 12% wetness, more than that it cannot be there. So what we do when it is around about 8 to 10%, we take out the steam and we again heat it up and remove the moisture and heat it up and put it in a low pressure turbine, and in the low pressure turbine, after doing the work, it is very west, it has got practically no heat, it is taken out, it is condensed. What do you do for condensing? The steam is flowing and we have tubes carrying water, cold water, and this water could be drawn either from a river or something like a cooling tower. This cooling tower is used where there are no rivers. If a river is there, we take a river water, if sea is there, we take a sea water and cool it. The condensed water is pumped to heaters which are called feed water heaters. There could be 2 stages, there could be 3 stages, and again the feed water enters to the boiler or the steam generator. So this is a conventional steam water system, and it is no different in a nuclear power plant. So it is same as in a fossil fuel plant. This is to show you what components are there in a typical reactor. Of course, I have taken a pressurized water reactor. The core is there, this is a reactor vessel, the coolant goes, picks up the heat, comes out, exchanges heat in the steam generator, comes back, again is pumped back to the core. So this is cycle continues. On the secondary side, you have water entering the steam generator, becomes steam, runs the turbine, turbine runs the generator, condenser, and then coming back, pumped back to the. So this is a very typical, and of course this is showing the electricity, showing the electrical tower. Okay. Now these systems we have seen, and as I mentioned, even after you shut down a reactor, you must have cooling provided to the reactor, so that the fuel elements or temperatures are maintained below the acceptable limits. Now you take out the fuel after it has been burnt up to a certain level, and then you replace it by a fresh fuel. Now this burnt up fuel or the spent fuel needs to be again cooled. You can't just keep it in the air, you have to just be cooled, because it depends on the power level at which you are taking out. Roughly on an average, if the heat, decay heat is less than about 400 watts to 600 watts, maybe air cooling could be sufficient, but normally it is high of the order of some kilowatts. So it needs to be kept in cooling base or cooling ponds for quite some time. So this spent fuel cooling is very important. It is cooled because it cannot be handled immediately for reprocessing. The temperatures are also high, temperature has to be brought down, the activity has to be brought down, then only it can be used for sent for reprocessing. So the spent fuel handling is another. Fuel handling, again you require machines for that, taking out the fuel, putting the fuel. So that is a very complicated mechanical system, and that is really for a mechanical engineer, that is a real what you call real design, he can get the satisfaction, and the spent fuel handling is the other portion. Now coming to the reactor core, let us say we had a power failure and then the pumps will not be running. So, in that case we have to provide some emergency power to run the pumps, or in case you are not able to run those pumps, some other means by which we can cool the core to remove the decay heat. Believe it or not, two aspects need to be remembered: reactor shutdown and decay heat removal. These two aspects are to be kept in mind at every level. For every event this must be possible. Coming to the reactor types, I shall describe each reactor how it looks like later. The pressurized water reactor is the maximum number, about 271. The boiling water reactor is about 84. The 3 Mile Island was a pressurized water reactor. Fukushima was a boiling water reactor, and this is a CANDU or a heavy water reactor. This is mostly in India, Canada, Argentina and Pakistan. Then we have the gas cooled reactors, few of them, and this is again RBMK. This is a boiling water reactor, but there is a difference between this and this, which we shall see later. And sodium cooled fast reactor, there are about 6 such reactors, and we have one such reactor in India. If you see the coolant, or if you see the fuel, they use enriched uranium oxide in both the light water reactors, whereas natural uranium oxide is used in the heavy water reactors. Again these use enriched fuel. Of course, surely the fast reactor used enriched fuel along with plutonium. The coolant here is sodium, we shall see later how, why, whereas in gas cooled it is carbon dioxide. Moderator varies from light water here to the heavy water here, graphite, and of course in a fast reactor there is no moderator. Gas cooled reactor. This reactor concept was thought of in United Kingdom and France, and this Magnox reactor is a cooled by carbon dioxide is a gas, the fuel used is enriched uranium, and the clad is magnesium oxide, that is why it was called as Magnox, and the moderator is graphite, and you have control rods. The gas comes here, goes to a steam generator where steam is produced and it is producing electricity. Here they were able to reach temperatures as high as 600 degrees centigrade, but then there were a lot of failures of this Magnox clad due to reaction with water. So, with the experience gained in these reactors, they moved to the next one where they started using stainless steel as the clad, and while the moderator remained graphite and the coolant was still carbon dioxide. But one more difference they did: earlier they had used a vessel, steel pressure vessel, and now they have gone for a concrete pressure vessel. That was the difference, that is more as a safety aspect. So, otherwise things remained same, and these reactors operated for quite some time. Some of them are still operation in UK. Then this pressurized heavy water reactor, this is our mainstay of India's power program. We have nearly 22 such reactors, most of them producing about 200 to 220 megawatt electrical each, and some of them are now producing 500 megawatt electrical, and we are building heavy water reactors which can produce 700 megawatt electrical. So, here you have the reactor core. These pressurized heavy water reactors, as is shown here, they have a fuel element which are put inside horizontal channels, they are called as pressure tubes. So, the coolant flows from one end to the other, the hot heavy water is the coolant, comes out, goes out, exchanges heat to light water and then comes back and again, and there are such channels in 220 megawatt reactor. There are about 306 channels, and the moderator heavy water is put in this big tank called as the calandria. So, it is in a big tank of heavy water in which these pressure tubes are kept in a horizontal position, and then this is how it is done. And the uniqueness of these reactors is they are having on load fueling. Here the fuel is natural uranium, clad is zirconium, moderator is again heavy water, but these two heavy waters are different. The coolant heavy water flows inside the channels, whereas the moderate heavy water is outside. Then the pressurized water reactors. In fact, these pressurized water reactors and the boiling water reactors which comes next, both are called as light water reactors because they use light water. The heavy water reactors, initially they were called CANDU because they are based on the canadium, deuterium, uranium, but in a general way it is called as a pressurized heavy water reactor. Here we use light water, and believe it, light water does not have that good moderation. If does not have that good moderation, the neutrons cannot be slowed down to a good level. So, that means you need to put more fissile atoms to get the same amount of fission reactions. So, it requires enriched, so it cannot with 0.7% uranium 235, light water is not able to make the reactor critical. So, you require enrichment. So, it used enriched uranium 235. So, here the enrichment is of the order of 3 to 5%, and this enrichment process, as I mentioned in my previous lecture, is a costly process. Few countries have this enrichment process. So, here the clad is zircaloy, again moderator and coolant both are same, they are not separate. The same coolant acts like a moderator, and the water which is goes here, it goes into a steam generator, exchanges heat, comes back, and they are vertical here. And the feature of this, it does not do any on load, you cannot do fuel, you have to shut down the plant and do the refueling, and then you see the steam generator and the whole reactor is within the concrete building, containment as we call, and then this is the turbine circuit. As I mentioned, such type of reactors are the maximum number, and the reactor at Kudangulam which we are building in India is of this type. The boiling water reactor. The boiling water reactor, as I mentioned, it has got a single circuit. The reactor coolant enters here, picks up the heat, goes to directly to the turbine. So, one way if you see, this steam may be active, so the turbine also could be active. So, this puts us limit. Whenever there is a problem on the turbine, you have got to repair it, you have to take some time until the activity dies down, and here it is shielded to some extent, the turbine, and this is a generator, and then this is a cooling water and electricity produced and sent to our house. Here the things are same, fuel is enriched uranium 235 up to about 5%, clad is zircaloy, moderator and coolant are light water. You notice one difference between the pressurized water reactor. Here the control rods are coming from top. The reason is, here in this system everything is water in this, there is no steam at all, it is all water. Whereas in a boiling water reactor, steam is produced here and not a full saturated steam. So, and you cannot send steam mixed with water to the turbine. So, you have moisture separators at the top of the reactor, and then only the steam is sent here. Since the moisture separators are here, it puts an obstruction for the control rods. So, the control rods are pushed from the bottom. control rods in a boiling water reactor come from the bottom. This is the difference between the two. Then this is the RBMK reactor, and the best example of this RBMK reactor I can give you is Chernobyl, and the previous boiling water reactor. We have two such reactors in India. The first two reactors, commercial reactors built at Tarapur, were the boiling water reactor. They were given to us in collaboration with USA by the General Electric. We found that it requires enriched uranium, and continued dependence on enriched uranium on other countries is not good. We found that the heavy water technology requires only natural uranium, and this heavy water technology preparation, development of technology for heavy water preparation is a chemical process on which we had a good stronghold, and we could develop that to a reasonable level. So we went ahead with heavy water reactors, while those developed countries went with enriched uranium and boiling water reactors and pressurized water reactors. So I will now come to the pressure tube boiling water reactor called as the RBMK. Here the channels are vertical channels, they are all pressure tubes. Just as a pressure tube in a heavy water reactor in a horizontal, they are vertical. They use this concept because they found that making a pressure tube is easier because it is a small diameter, whereas instead of making a large pressure vessel of a bigger diameter in those days. So they put upon this sort of a design, and it is just similar to a light water reactor, but the difference is the moderator is graphite. So lot of graphite moderator is put, and the steam comes out, and this is a drum where the steam is separated, it is sent to a turbine and runs the generator. This was used in the Chernobyl reactor. One difference is this particular reactor type did not have the containment. That is a very important aspect, and compared to the boiling water reactor, this used graphite as a moderator, and as we know, in the Chernobyl reactor, because of the overpower, the graphite got heated up and caught fire. That actually added fuel to the fire. Now we move on to the fast reactors. As I mentioned, in the case of light water reactors, the pressurized water, the boiling water reactor, or the RBMK, the fission is by slow or thermal neutrons, whereas in a fast reactor it is by fast neutrons. And why fast neutrons? Uranium 238 absorbs a neutron and gets converted to plutonium, which is a fissile element. Now a core for a fast reactor must essentially consist of higher amount of fissionable material, because the cross sections or the probability of a fission reaction is low at high energies. So it consists of a mixture of plutonium 239 and uranium 235 of the order of about 20%. But some of the research reactors wherein you want to simulate the neutron flux of larger reactors, you have something like 70 to 80%. And now this uranium 238, we just do not go and get again, it remains from the used fuel of the fast thermal reactors, which we put in the fast reactors. So we are basically utilizing the waste of the thermal reactor in a fast reactor and getting it converted. There have been two concepts of the fast reactors, one is called as a loop type, other is called as a pull type. In the loop type, all components are kept separately and connected by pipes. You have the reactor core, and sodium is the coolant which removes heat from the core and exchanges heat to another sodium in a heat exchanger. This is called as intermediate heat exchanger, and this sodium in turn gives heat to water, which produces steam to run a turbine. Rest of the things remain same. You might wonder in a boiling water reactor we had just one loop, in a pressurized water reactor we had 2 loops, here we have 3 loops. It is a major reason. Sodium is used as a coolant in fast reactors because we are able to reach high temperatures. Sodium has got a boiling point of 930 degrees centigrade, and because of that, without pressurizing the system we can go to a high temperature in sodium, unlike water. We reach something like 500 to 525 degrees centigrade temperature, and we are able to produce steam around 500 degrees centigrade, which is very close to the fossil fuel condition. So the efficiencies of steam cycle here is of the order of 38 to 40%, whereas in a light water reactor like a boiling water reactor or a pressurized water reactor, the efficiencies are around 30 to 32% only, and this does make a difference. More the efficiency, less the amount of fuel and less the waste. But why these 3 circuits? Why not get rid of the second sodium circuit? Unfortunately, you see, in life everywhere you have get an advantage, you have to pay a price. This sodium has got a good affinity for water and air. Sodium, if you put outside, it burns. Sodium, if it comes in contact with water, it forms an exothermic reaction producing sodium hydroxide and hydrogen, and hydrogen is a moderating material. We have now designed a fast reactor without a moderating material. What will happen if a moderating material gets into the reactor? Think about it. We have said no moderation, so all fast neutrons, we have provided lot of fissile material. Now this moderating materials get inside the reactor, they will become thermalized, slow neutrons, the fission reaction probability will increase and the whole thing may become supercritical. So from a safety angle, we do not want any leakage in the steam generator which results in a sodium water reaction to affect the core. So we have an intermediate circuit. This is designed to withstand the pressures of a sodium water reaction. So that is the reason why we have 2 such circuits. As I mentioned, enriched plutonium oxide is the fuel, clad is stainless steel, no moderator, and coolant is sodium. In the pool type reactor, the difference is very simple. We have put all the primary components in a big pool. This is the core, we have the intermediate heat exchanger, we have the pump here which pumps into the core, that goes to the IHX and comes out to the cold pool. The whole thing is in a single vessel and rest of the circuits are same. What is the advantage of this sort of a concept? You see here the size is big, cold sodium, hot sodium. What happens in case of an event, let us say there is a power failure and the reactor is shut down, the coolant flow will come down, temperatures surely will come down initially because of shutdown, then the temperature is raised in case the cooling is not. The rate of temperature rise should be low, then it gives you operator enough time to handle the situation, and that is the main advantage of a pool type reactor. The thermal capacity, large amount of sodium is there, so it will take less more time to raise by the same amount. So the transients introduced, thermal transients are less, that is one big advantage. And the second advantage, we saw pipes in the loop type reactor. So in case there is a leak here, radioactive sodium will leak out, but here in the pool type we do not have that. Any leakage is there, it will be contained within this large vessel, and this is a big advantage of a pool type reactor. Earlier reactors, small reactors are generally of the loop type have been built, now the bigger reactors are pool type. In India, our fast breeder test reactor, which is already operating at Kalpakkam since 1985, is a loop type reactor, while PFBR, which is likely to go critical in the next 1 or 2 years, is going to be a pool type reactor. Now we have had a look at the different types of reactors. you might see so many designs have been there, but slowly people are getting a consensus to consolidate the efforts of research and try to corner or converge on few reactor types on which we do more work to have more and more safer reactors. They are called as the generation 4 reactors, about which we will see in the next lecture. Thank you.